Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Hirsch from the Worcester Department of Public Health, and here for another edition of Staying Connected with the Worcester Senior Center. I'm always so happy to be able to provide a segment like this every month. So we're in the merry month of May, and yeah, I am going to talk to you a little bit about COVID, more towards the end of my little spiel today. But I wanted to change it up a little bit. You see, it's spring. Spring is everywhere. I'm not wearing a jacket because it's so warm, but I am wearing my American College of Surgeons tie and my American College of Surgeons 100th anniversary of the Committee of Trauma hat. That's to remind me what my real topic is today. May is Trauma Awareness Month. May is the start of what we call at the Trauma Center at UMass and everywhere, really, the beginning of trauma season. When the weather gets warm and when people are out and about, you get many more crashes of cars, pedestrians hit by cars, people biking who fall, people who are just, enjoying the outdoors. Unfortunately, sometimes things go wrong. Trauma is a very, very big part of our medical burden when we're taking care of many, many different kinds of critically ill patients. Trauma represents about 40% of them. And it's the number one killer of people in the United States up until the age of 34. And that's a real big statistic because that's the flower of our youth, right? That goes from little babies all the way to young folk at 34 years of age when they unfortunately succumb to a tragic, we don't call it accident, we call it an injury event, and I'll talk more about that in a second. When they have an injury event that takes their life, it has a huge ripple effect into their family, into their community, into sometimes the whole state, depending on the circumstances. And it also deprives society of a productive life. That person would have probably worked or gone to school and become a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, or some other profession. And we lose all those productive work years when their lives are cut short. Now, as far as the population that we're usually talking about here in these sessions, the people over the age of 60, this is the number one killer of the elderly as well. Trauma is a bad actor in this group as well. And many of the injuries are similar. Many of the mechanisms are similar. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can prevent some of those injuries today. Elder falls is the number one killer of the elderly by a lot. I mean, you think about all of the cancers and all of the heart disease problems, it still ranks number one. And so much of these elder falls are preventable. And a lot of the prevention falls on you or your immediate cohabitants and wherever you're living. Your children can help you, and hopefully your physician will be helping you too if you have concerns. So let me start with that. Trauma is really 90% preventable through all ages. And a lot of it depends on anticipation and just seeing lots and lots of trauma victims coming in over and over again. We see the mechanisms that get them in trouble. Most of the elderly get into problems in their home. It's not like out mountain climbing, although I know many of you are quite active and out there and hiking, and that's all great. But really, number one is falls in or around your home. And then second would probably be motor vehicle crashes if you are still driving. So let's talk about the driving thing first, because I'm going to put that on the side here. As you get older, your senses aren't as sharp as they were. Your vision is not as sharp. Your hearing is not as sharp. Your reaction time is not as sharp. All of those things are setups for more risky driving. And you need to actually be a very self-aware person if you're still driving. Are you driving safely? Are you, because of the lack of senses that you might be experiencing, not as able to see a pedestrian shooting out in front of your car? Are you not as able to see stop signs or a car coming to an intersection that is not going to stop? Are your reaction times good enough? It's a very, very important part of your independence. I know if you're still driving, you want to keep driving. But there comes a point where you have to be able to admit to yourself, I think I'm done driving. And it shouldn't come after a crash or after a near miss. You probably are getting signals that you didn't see that person. Luckily, you didn't hit them when you were driving at night. That your night driving is really not good because your night vision goes much sooner than other vision. And it's painful for the people around you if they're driving with you and they notice that you're having problems, to be the one to bring it up to you. So sometimes what I've seen is a child or a spouse will bring it up in the primary care doctor's office. And sometimes the person they're talking about doesn't take it that well. Like, what are you talking about? Why are you calling me out on my driving here? You've never said anything to me in the car. Doctors are used to taking those kind of calls and said, well, I may have mentioned at some point to your spouse, to your son, to your daughter, how's the driving going? Because sometimes you personally will not fess up to the fact that it's not going so well. So don't be caught being told by someone else your time behind the wheel is over. Be aware. And there are some things, there are courses that the Department of Motor Vehicles and AAA offer for older drivers. And a lot of it is just like picking your spots. Don't drive at night. Don't drive at peak rush hour. Don't drive when school is going in and out and you have to contend with all the school buses. Use that middle of the day as the time you're going to go out and about. And, many times some of the grocery stores have special elder hours that they're allowing people to come and do their shopping, trying to accommodate the senior citizens. Take advantage of those things. So that's all I'm going to say about driving, because it's a big topic, and I want to go into a little bit more about home safety, because that's where we see a lot of issues. So there's some very basic principles about this. And by the way, the reason I'm wearing this American College of Surgeons stuff is this is an organization of all the surgeons in the country, and there's a subset of them that take care of trauma patients. And the American College of Surgeons has a program to accredit or verify whether a particular trauma program is an excellent one. And we at UMass have been very, very fortunate that since pretty much 1991, we've been acknowledged to be a level 1, meaning the highest trauma center for adults. And what has evolved since the beginning of our verification in 1991 is that we're supposed to keep very careful statistics on what mechanisms are bringing in the patients as injured patients. Falls, motor vehicle crashes, gunshot wounds, assaults, pedestrian injuries, sports injuries like getting hit by a ball or falling off a bike. So we keep tabs of that, and the American College of Surgeons says take the top 3 diagnoses that are bringing patients in, and you are required now to be an injury prevention center for those three top things. So elder falls is our number one source of elder injury. And you keep hearing me say injury, 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 and not accident, accident, accident. So let's get to that basic. Accidents is not an acceptable word in the science of traumatology, the study of trauma, because an accident is an act of fate. Like if you're walking down the street and for some odd reason a piece of a satellite falls out of the sky and hits you on the noggin, that's an accident. That's not preventable, that's not predictable. But if you are going out on a dark, snowy night, taking a drive, and you have a little bit of cataracts or macular degeneration, and maybe you did take a little glass of wine with dinner before you left to go behind the wheel, all of those are risk factors that add up to a predictable injury event, not accident. So injury events are predictable, and therefore they are preventable. And as I said, 90% of these injury events are preventable. So we're not using the word accidents. We used to have the broadcasters on TV, they would say, this is an MVA, motor vehicle accident. Not anymore. It's now an MVC, motor vehicle crash. So I'm not going to use that word. It sometimes slips out accidentally. That's a joke, bad joke. But I'm not going to use that word. I'm only going to call these injury events. So let's talk about basics around the house and in the house. First of all, let me just say, the ladder or staircases or step stools are not your friend. Because the one thing that leads to more injury events in the home for the elderly than anything else is your balance is not as good as it used to be. Your balance is what keeps you from falling. And there are things you can do to improve your balance. Right at the Worcester Senior Center, they offer either on video or classes in the place to teach Tai Chi. And there's another sanctioned course called A Matter of Balance, which helps the elderly get better at, keeping erect, keeping without having any assistive devices. Now, some of you, because you've had arthritis, because you've had hip replacements, because you've had other medical conditions that make it hard for you to do things without listing to one side, you can use assistive devices. The walker, the cane not just with one little rubber end to it, but there are these four-pronged canes you've probably seen that are very sturdy and will give you some extra support. But you have to learn how to use them correctly. And the Senior Center has folk that can show you how to do that. And then there are also other courses that are offered either, again, online or in person. The AARP has a list of a lot of these courses around the community where you can get this information. The YMCA, the YWCA have offered these kind of courses as well. So anytime you're going up, even those little step ladders, or you decide you don't like the smoke alarm that you have and you want to get up on the ladder, think about that, okay? Don't do that alone. And if you can find a younger person to do that, don't challenge yourself to get up on these ladders. If you live in a single family or duplex kind of a home that has gutters, don't be cleaning out the gutters yourself. Honestly, I know that's easier said than done. It's expensive sometimes to get somebody to clean out your gutters, but I can't tell you how many ladder falls we have. You probably know that I've been running what's called a gun buyback program here in the area for the last 20 years. It's called Goods for Guns. Well, at the height of the Goods for Guns program about 10 years ago, one of the adult trauma surgeons, I take care of mostly children, one of the adult trauma surgeons tried to set up a program based on mine with one of the big hardware stores, a ladder buyback program, because so many people were coming in with falls off of ladders that he just said, I got to get rid of ladders in the community, which is kind of funny, but we never pulled it off. We never were able to set up that course, but you get the message there. So many of the elderly are on anticoagulant drugs, blood thinners, Coumadin, and Plavix, and all of these special medications, sometimes just baby aspirin. If you fall, whatever you fall on will have a much higher likelihood of bleeding either under the skin or into the joint, or worst of all, into your brain, and make your recovery and sometimes even your survival less likely. So step number one, think about ladders, think about not doing the step stool stuff, and going up the stairwell. If you don't have good handrails in your house, see if you can find someone who will put them in. Now, for example, the Firefighters Union has gone out to homes of the elderly and installed ramps, and they've installed rails on the front stoops and inside the home on stairwells to make sure that you have good grip and support going up or going down. And also think about if going up and down the stairs is an adventure for you, organize your day so you're not doing it 10 times a day. You know, see if you have an ability to kind of move what you need downstairs and stay downstairs most of the day until it's time to go up. The idea of going up and down, it just increases the likelihood that you'll have a misadventure on the stairwell. So I'll start with that. Now, what I was going to say is I'd like to at least go room by room to tell you some of the common things that we know will potentially cause an injury event risk, increasing the likelihood that you're going to take a fall. Number one, and I think I told you last month, I lost my 96-year-old mother this past November, and she was the queen of this, right? She had macular degeneration, and she was very hard of hearing, but she loved rugs, small rugs, runner rugs, throw rugs, tiny rugs. They were everywhere in an apartment. And if you don't lift up your feet, and I don't lift up my feet so great, I was tripping on those rugs. And I know this is something that people love. They're beautiful. They really enhance the look of your room. Some of them are heirlooms. Some of them are, Persian rugs and all different kind of fancy knitted rugs. They're not your friend. They're not your friend. If you've had an episode of losing your balance, if you've had an episode of falling, if you know that, your vision is not as good as it was, get rid of those rugs. The floor is fine. Nobody's going to bother with your floor. When they come, they're going to look at your beautiful face. They're not looking down at the floor. So trip risks like that. Also, running extension cords or wires across the floor. Those are big time risks. And we see this a lot. Sometimes it's an electric heater. Sometimes it's a fan. Sometimes it's some other kind of TV or electric device, and there's not enough outlets. People may, use one extension cord. That's a very, very common reason to trip, and especially if you're in a hurry. If you decide suddenly while you're watching TV that you have to go to the bathroom kind of urgently, that's where we see a lot of these trips. So watch for those kind of trip risks, the rugs and the cords, big time risks. And of course, if you have a multi-generational household, you really do have to tell the little ones in the house or the ones taking care of the little ones in the house to pick up those toys, to make sure they're not leaving, whether it's marbles or baseball bats or things lying around that you might not see, especially if it's a little bit darker at night. Those are the things that will trip you up. And these trips that the elderly have are very consequential. You can break a hip, and I know you've had friends that have done that. Now we have some very, very great techniques of replacing the hip, but it's a long road of recovery, and along with it comes a lot of risks for other things like blood clots in your leg and pneumonias, and you can also hit your head, as we talked about, and if you're on those blood thinners, all adds up to badness. So keep yourself from doing the falls. Let's go in the kitchen for a minute, okay? Probably the most common injury that we're seeing now in the kitchen with the elderly is microwave burns. Now, you may not realize it yourself, but as you age, the skin gets a lot thinner. It's not as beefy as it used to be. So it's very easy to get a scald burn. And sometimes if you're living alone, or if you just happen to like ramen noodle soup or whatever it is that is very easily microwavable, it's a delightful thing to be able to have kind of a meal ready in 3 minutes just by adding a little water, and bam, you're done. But when they come out of the microwave, they're piping hot. And people don't realize they put their hands in and grab the bowl, or they grab the plastic dish, and it's too hot, and they go, ow! And that spills all over the place on their arms, and they get burns on their hands. And sometimes these spills spill the hot liquid onto the floor, and if you're visually impaired, you might not see it and you could slip. So we've seen all different combinations of this. The microwave has to be handled very, very carefully. You have to have good oven mitts that will allow you to pick this up, or if you've got somebody else around who's a little bit younger, don't let them do it also barehanded, but let them help you with this. I know it's not possible if you live alone and you're trying to maintain your independence, but I can tell you that we've seen a lot of very bad burns from this. And burns are painful, and burns can get infected, and you can get into a lot of trouble with a bad burn in the elderly age group. All different kind of problems with scalding water too. That goes for the bathroom if you still like to take tub baths, which I know some of you do. You have to make sure that your water heater in that place that you live, whether it's the landlord that you have to talk to if you're renting or if you own it, don't keep the water heater temperature higher than 120 degrees, because that's the degree above which it's very likely that if you have a tub full of that hot water, you're going to get scalded when you put your feet in it. And unfortunately, what happens is people sometimes will fill up a tub, they don't realize how hot it is, and they just daintily put their toe or their foot in. Ow, ow, ow. Now you're on one foot with the other foot really hurting. You'll slip, you'll fall, you'll either fall into the tub and burn yourself worse, or you'll fall out of the tub and potentially hit yourself on the porcelain or on the floor. All of those things can be avoided if you keep the water temperature at 120 or less. And that's plenty hot to, wash your hands, clean your dishes, whatever. You don't need it higher than that. There are devices that you can use in the bathtub. There's a inflatable plastic ring you can put around the faucet. So if the faucet gets super hot and it retains heat for a while, you can use that to protect yourself from bumping into it and getting a burn that way. And in general, you just have to be very aware that straight hot water may not be the best thing for you. Run a little cold too, and test it. Test it. Don't just dump your hands in it. Put your little pinky in there. Why do I say pinky? The index finger has the most nerves of any part of your body except the eye. And so you don't want to burn your index finger. It's very painful. You can sacrifice your pinky a little bit. Pinky dip in there, and that'll tell you, oh, it's too hot, or you got to add a little more cold water to it. So that's what I can mostly tell you about the kitchen and probably the bathroom. I will also say in the bathroom, your medications, you have to learn how to manage them well. If your sight is not so great and all these pill bottles look all the same, you need to have a system to organize it. And you probably have seen those, Sunday to Saturday little kits where in each day you can put the medication you want. God willing, you're well enough to do that on your own. Sit down every Sunday and reload that thing. If you can't, you need somebody to help you do that. And that way you make sure that you're not taking the wrong medication, taking too much of a medication. We see a lot of tragedies with poisonings that way. I don't know how many of you, grew up in communities, I did, where everything was reused. We never threw anything away. So if we had a bottle of Coca-Cola, back then, they came in bottles. Now they're plastic, but we had real glass bottles. And somebody, had some cleaning fluid and they didn't know where to store it, and then they would pour it into the Coke bottle. Coke bottle would then have this bright blue or bright green liquid to it. And we've seen some very bad tragedies where a grandparent has an inquisitive toddler roaming around the house, and they see this beautiful colored liquid in one of these Coke bottles. I'm just pointing out Coke bottle. It could be any kind of clear bottle like that. And they think it's something to drink, and they drink it. And it can have lye in it, which will cause terrible burns to the inside of your esophagus. So you got to be careful what you leave around. Watch batteries. Do not leave little button watch batteries around, because kids get a hold of that, they can really severely burn the inside of their intestinal tract. And that's a whole nother kettle of fish of a preventable injury that we never heard of until about 20 years ago, when these watches with these tiny little round batteries came into play. I think the other thing that you have to be very careful of as far as safety around the house is windows. Sometimes this is more common in little kids. Little kid will be bouncing on a bed and actually bounce so forcefully that if there's a window near the bed with a screen in it, they can push the screen right out. But we've seen some of the elderly trying to just either clean their windows or install their screens in the summertime and go right out the window. So, look, there's something about the greatest generation, which you're part of, that doesn't like to accept help, is, just very proud of doing everything themselves. And what I'm telling you is there's nothing wrong with asking for help. if you have other family members, if you have neighbors who are younger, take advantage of them. That you've earned it. You've done all you can as a citizen, as a potential grandma, mom, or even if you don't have kids, still you've been a productive member of our society here in Worcester, and we want to keep you here, and we don't want the end to be one of these injury events. It's a very, very preventable thing, and that's what we're trying to do. Injury prevention is so important. Unfortunately, it's not very well funded, but a lot of it can be driven by your own desire to be healthy and also to set an example for the rest of your family, that you've had these devices installed, or sometimes, again, if you're dealing with a multi-generational house and there's lots of outlets, there are these outlet plugs you can put in there so the little ones don't stick their finger in the socket, and all of these kind of protective devices. So it just takes a lot of thought. Let me just mention one of the most important things you should have in your house, and that's a working smoke alarm and a working carbon monoxide detector. Those two things have saved countless of lives. And here in the city of Worcester, we have a wonderful fire prevention division of the fire department, and they will come and do a home assessment for you. If you look up on our www.worcesterma.gov website, you can find that section, and they will come out and do an assessment, and many times they will provide you with a smoke alarm if you need one. The smoke alarms all run on those 9-volt batteries, and the 9-volt batteries, usually we recommend that you change them when we change the clocks so that we make sure that they're working. I'm sure you've heard stories of house fires where people will say they had smoke alarms, but they weren't working. And that doesn't do any good, right? There are also stories where people don't even have the smoke alarms, and that is one of the reasons that the fire got out of control. But I would say they need to have the battery changes, but not by you. I don't want you up on the ladder changing them. I want someone else to change them. If that's not possible, I would call that fire prevention department in the fire department. They will help you. But if you have a younger relative, son, grandson, who can get up on that ladder and change that battery for you, let them do it. Don't you get up on those ladders. It's just not right. It's not a healthy thing. And it will lead to significant tragedies. And you know, we know everybody has a limited amount of time on this earth, but it shouldn't be limited by these preventable injuries. You should be able to live a good, full life and die. If you need to die of natural causes, that's something completely different. But these preventable injury events, it's a very tragic thing. So Trauma Awareness Month is supposed to bring out awareness about all these things that we just talked about how falls are preventable, about how you can improve your balance and make the falls less likely, how you can eliminate these trip risks in your home, how you can be more aware of whether you're skilled enough to continue to be a driver as an elderly person. Think about all of those things I mentioned: scald burns, burns in the bathtub, burns from the microwave, and just trying to be sensible about the throw rugs and the cords and things that you run across the floor that make it so much more dangerous for you to traverse your own apartment or your own house. So I would urge you to make an effort to have May be the month that you think more and more about how to make your life safer, in whether it's going room by room and thinking about what might be a risk for you, or whether you just want to tackle a couple of things in the month of May that will keep you from being a trauma victim. So I'm gonna segue now. It's not a really good segue to COVID because I'm kind of obligated to talk about COVID wherever I go. So you see here I have my N95 mask, and I'm not wearing it. I'm not wearing it because currently we don't really know where the COVID epidemic is going. I mentioned the word epidemic instead of pandemic because I think what we're seeing now is that there are going to be these outbreaks of higher case numbers of COVID from some variant. Right now, it seems to be the BA2 variant of Omicron. But whatever it is, these newer variants, they're very transmissible, but they're a lot less lethal, a lot less likely to put you in the hospital, particularly if you've had your vaccinations and kept up with your boosters. Now, you know that now the recommendation is that within 4 months of your last booster, you should probably get another shot now of whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson. All the pharmacies are offering this. We still have the Mercantile Center giving out shots on Fridays, at least until May 15th. And Dr. Castile, our Commissioner of Health and Human Services, still has her equity vaccination program that's going around the city. And we post all of that every week on our website. You'll see the schedule of where you can get these. As far as where we're going, I think that we have enough people who have been exposed to this virus and got it, unfortunately. The Omicron surge in particular in December and January got many, many thousands of people exposed. And then we have now a 63% vaccination rate here in Worcester with a 50% booster rate. We want those numbers to go up. They are very gradually going up, but I think the combination of those two, native immunity, which is what you get after you have the COVID infection, or vaccination immunity, is making it harder for the virus to find people to infect. So there are a lot of people clamoring. We rescinded the mask mandate back in the end of middle of March. And there's a lot of people upset that we did that, saying, look, now we're having another mini surge or surge. I don't think it was predictable back then that we were going to have a surge. And I don't think it's going to be predictable moving forward that well if there's a surge here or coming. We are constantly monitoring the wastewater in Worcester. It's been kind of definitely higher than it was back in the end of February, but it's kind of been wavering. 1 week it's up, 1 week it's down, and it's nowhere near the level that it was at the middle of December when Omicron was at its height. But it's not as low as it was when it was absolutely undetectable the end of February. So we've got to continue to monitor the situation very carefully. I think it's going to be up to the individual to decide if you're greater than 65 in age, if you have immune compromised disease like lupus or cancer, if you have lung problems, heart problems, if you have obesity or diabetes, type 1 or type 2, those are all risk factors for getting COVID. If you get COVID with those risk factors, your likelihood of getting hospitalized is much higher. That's the group that we would very much encourage. Wear a good mask, not just the old paper 3-ply one or the cloth ones, the gaiters and things like that, wear a good KN95 or N95 mask indoors, particularly if it's a public gathering and you don't know who else is vaccinated. It's not your family that you know is vaccinated. And if it's very, very crowded, like there's no possibility in this indoor event that you're attending for any kind of social distancing, those people we think should be wearing a mask. But the rest of us, we can make a personal choice. Now, I'm over 65, and I also am in remission from cancer, but that puts me at a risk. So I am wearing this in indoor settings. But I don't think the mandates are really going to happen again. It's very hard to put that genie back in the bottle. Once we have kind of freed up the community to do activity without masks, I think they want to put COVID in the rearview mirror, and so do I, but not by being an ostrich. I don't want to ignore the fact that COVID is still around. It is, and I think it's going to continue to have these little blips, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near the level of hospitalization or the degree of illness that we had in previous surges. The hospital numbers have gone up, but they're not nearly as high as they were in any of the other three pandemics, outbreaks. So I think we're going to have a good summer, I do, because all of the indication is that this BA2 variant in Europe, UK, Israel, went away very quickly, just like Omicron 1 did. It peaked way, way high until January 10th or 11th, and then it fell like a stone. By the end of January, it was barely around. So are we going to see others take its place? Probably. Are they going to go crazy with like the level of disease that Omicron 1 provided? I don't think so. See, the virus really mutates to try to propagate itself, to make sure that it is spreading, but it doesn't want to hurt us necessarily to the point where it's putting us in the hospital or killing us. If it kills us, there's no more people to infect. So it's not going to work that way, because that would be committing virus suicide. So I think that we are in a better place. We need to celebrate the fact that we are in a better place. And everything that I'm telling you now could be 100% wrong when we talk again in June. I will take the hit for that. I'm really working hard with all of the brilliant scientists that we have at UMass and St. Vincent's Hospital and the Mass Department of Public Health and nationally to kind of come up with the right advice for you all. And I hope I've given you that. I know I've disappointed some people. Some people didn't want the masks to come off ever. Some people wanted them to come off 6 months before we talked about it. It's hard to get everybody together with one opinion about COVID. But the one thing I can tell you is that City Manager Augustus and now his soon-to-be replacement, Eric Batista, are super committed to get us as a community through this. 530 odd deaths that we've had here in the Worcester area is 530 too many, and we all feel for that. It reminds me to tell you that if you do like to take a stroll for your health, which is great, and as I mentioned, if you're at all unsteady, get yourself one of those canes or a walker. Take the Morse stroll around Elm Park. That's named after my predecessor at the Department of Public Health, Dr. Leonard Morse, who served the city for over 30 years. He's Worcester born and bred. He grew up very close to Elm Park on the west side of Worcester, was a brilliant, brilliant infectious disease specialist. Back in 1969, he solved the mystery of a hepatitis A outbreak at Holy Cross at a time when Holy Cross was the #1 ranked football team in the nation. He solved that, and the way he solved it is still studied in public health schools as like the perfect example of how a public health investigator can solve a mystery like that of an outbreak. Dr. Morse, when he left Worcester to retire to be near his son in Virginia, we dedicated a perimeter path around beautiful Elm Park in his name. And on every corner, there's a concrete stone that says Morse Stroll. So I would recommend you take that Morse Stroll, and on your way around the perimeter, right in front of the beautiful St. Spiridon Church, the Greek Orthodox Church next to Elm Park, you will find a monument that we dedicated a few weeks ago to the healthcare workers, the essential workers, and those unfortunate Worcesterians that succumbed to the virus. It was a beautiful ceremony. It was attended by a number of people who had lost loved ones, by quite a few primary care, first responders, essential workers, and it was a very moving ceremony, very moving. And every time you pass by that on the Morse Stroll, I want you to think about what you've gone through. This is something that we're going to talk to our children about, and hopefully we won't see any pandemics in the immediate future, but I think that as we come through this, we're going to have to start reflecting on everything that we learned, all of the health inequities that were shown to be a problem, all of the ageism that went into, unfortunately, so many of our elderly brethren dying in that first group of victims of COVID, because we just didn't understand how fast this would spread through nursing homes and skilled nurses facilities. It's painful to look backwards, but we have to learn from it so we can do better the next time. So I'm going to quit here. I'm wishing you all a wonderful, merry month of May. And Mother's Day is in May, and it's my first time without my mom. But if you're somebody's mom, or if you're listening and you have a mom, please make sure that on May 8th, I think it is, that you pay them homage, because they give you everything, and they deserve a special day. It's also the month for Memorial Day, and that's a day when we honor the fallen, all of those who've given the ultimate sacrifice to preserve our union and preserve democracy in the world. When you see what's happening in the Ukraine, you have to value the preciousness of our own political system here. And that's what I'll be doing on Memorial Day. My late father-in-law, who passed during the pandemic, was a bombardier on a B-29 in the Pacific, and we'll plant the flag there as well. So thinking about all of you this month of May, be safe, be well, do not become a trauma victim, and hopefully stay away from COVID, and I'll talk to you next month. Thanks for listening.